Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a press conference with Canada's leader, Jagmeet Singh. We will hear from him on housing today. After his remarks, we will pass it along to questions in person from media that are attending in person. So one question, one follow-up, and then we will move to questions on Zoom. Same thing, one question, one follow-up. Alors, bienvenue tout le monde. Vous êtes bien à une conférence de presse avec le chef du NPD, Jagmeet Singh, sur le sujet du logement abordable. Alors, nous allons entendre de Jagmeet. Ensuite, nous allons aux questions des médias qui sont présents en personne. Alors, ça sera une question de suivi. Ensuite, nous allons aux questions via Zoom. Alors, une question et une question de suivi. Je passe la parole au chef du NPD, Jagmeet Singh. Mike is yours.
Thanks so much. I have some students behind me, and they were just sharing their stories. We've got a housing crisis in our country, and we are weeks away from school starting, and these students are saying there's just no way for them to afford to live downtown. They go to school at U of T, but the cost of renting a place in Toronto, the average rent now is over $2,500 a month. What student can afford $2,500 a month? And one would think, okay, what about if you have roommates? Even with a roommate or four, it is so costly. I heard one of the students mention that because it's so competitive, landlords are asking for a whole year's worth of rent as a deposit. What student can come up with that type of liquidity? It's impossible. People are taking out loans just to be able to put down their deposit because it's so hard to secure a place. And it shouldn't be this way. Students like the ones behind me should be worried about their school, should be thinking about what courses they're taking and their books that they're going to take, or they're going to read, and planning for their career and their future, not worried about where they're going to live. On top of that, we've got students that are taking multi-hour commutes just to get to school. Multi-hour every day just to get to school. That's going to definitely impact their ability to participate in programs, after school programs, and be able to engage in their education. This is what we're up against. After 9 years of the Conservatives in power, with Pierre Poilievre being a key cabinet minister, they didn't make investments to make sure student housing was affordable. And after 8 years of Justin Trudeau being in power, things have gotten worse, not better. We have to tackle this problem. Housing is a problem in general, but it's particularly also a challenge for students. Right behind me, though, there's a project that's going to house over 500 students with deeply affordable rent. We need to see more projects like this. This is a project which was a collaboration between businesses, within business, the institution, and a not-for-profit organization. We need to see more of those collaborations to build housing that's actually affordable for students. So what we're proposing is a real plan to tackle the housing crisis with a focus on building housing specifically for students. We're proposing a partnership where there is a 1/3 agreement between the federal government, provinces, and educational institutions to convert empty office spaces into student dormitories and student housing. On top of that, we need to have more incentives in general between the federal government incentivizing business and not-for-profit organizations and the institutions, educational institutions, to convert empty office spaces into housing as well. We also need to make sure that we're tying student permits, study permits, to education institutions that have a plan to build a viable plan to build affordable housing and to have housing available for their students. We can do this, we can tackle this, but it means making this a priority. So far, we've seen the Liberals and the Conservatives not treat this with seriousness. You Democrats are committed to putting forward real plans that will ensure that students like the ones behind me can actually live close to the school they go to and focus on their studies. Donc, c'est clair qu'on est dans une crise du logement. C'est une crise qui frappe fort, mais en particulier, on est aussi dans une crise du logement plus étudiant. Dans quelques semaines, les étudiants vont retourner aux universités et au collège. Et j'ai parlé avec des étudiants comme celles qui sont derrière moi, et ils ont partagé leur histoire, comment ils ont besoin de voyager trop long pour arriver à l'école, comment ça coûte trop cher pour loyer un appartement et comment c'est impossible de trouver quelque chose abordable. après 9 ans de gouvernement conservateur, ils ont effectivement rien fait pour régler ce problème, particulièrement du logement, mais pour les logements pour les étudiants. Et après 8 ans de Justin Trudeau et le gouvernement libéral, ils ont manqué le coup. La situation est pire que jamais. Donc, ce qu'on propose, c'est de mettre en place un programme pour construire plus de logements abordables pour les étudiants. Un encadrement où le gouvernement fédéral contribue un tiers c'est provincial et un tiers c'est des universités et des écoles pour construire du logement pour les étudiants. On doit aussi encourager les entreprises et les organisations à but non lucratif et les écoles, les universités et les collèges de travailler ensemble pour construire plus de logements abordables. C'est tout à fait possible. Derrière moi, il y a un projet où ça va donner plus de 500 appartements pour les étudiants et avec des loyers vraiment abordables. On peut le faire, on a besoin de plus de projets comme ça. I also just want to take a moment and acknowledge the forest fires in Northwest Territories. Yellowknife, the capital of the territory, is now being evacuated. The situation is very serious. I was just in Yellowknife, and Yellowknife was receiving evacuation from surrounding communities, and now Yellowknife itself is being evacuated. Imagine what that means for families that are being told they've got to pack up their belongings, their loved ones, their pets, and then leave, get out of the city. This is extremely serious, and this is an example of how bad the forest fires have become now in our country, where we're seeing unprecedented forest fires. And my thoughts are with the community, and I'm going to continue to encourage the federal government to provide as much support as possible for those that are now being evacuated in Northwest Territories. Merci. With that, I'm ready for any questions you might have.
So we'll go directly to Zoom for questions. Just a reminder for media to use the raise hand function to ask a question and follow up. Alors, on va commencer avec les questions sur Zoom. Je rappelle tout le monde d'utiliser la fonction lever la main pour poser une question de suivi. Je vais aller, I'm going to go to David Thurton with the CBC. Please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Singh. Hopefully you can hear me, and thank you for providing this hookup so we can ask questions from here in Ottawa. I just want to ask you about the inquiry, the public inquiry into foreign interference that the NDP is calling for. Are you planning to access or read the documents that the Liberals have offered, those, that require that security clearance, which we understand you've been granted access? So are you planning to read or access those documents before there is an agreement on a public inquiry?
Thanks for the question. Yes, I am planning on reading those documents. I have received my clearance, top secret clearance, and my team is working on scheduling a time to see the documents. The documents are housed in secure facilities, and to view them requires being present in those secure facilities. So we're making those arrangements, but absolutely, my plan is to see those documents as soon as possible, and we're going to continue to push for a public inquiry, but that's not in any way going to limit my viewing of the documents. I'll see them as soon as I can.
Okay, and can you explain maybe just what the maybe you could tell us when you plan on doing that? Like, is it going to be this month? Is it going to be next month? We're just wondering this because we noticed the Green Party leader Elizabeth May says she's reviewed the documents, so we're just wondering just what's the holdup with you?
Yeah, we had the top clearance, the top secret clearance that was granted recently, a couple of weeks ago. And now we're scheduling the next stage, which is to see the documents. I'm on a summer tour, so I'm engaged with meeting people across the country. And with that tour, we're going to make sure we schedule time to be at one of the secure facilities to see the documents. So I can give you more details once my team has made the arrangements, but we're working on it and we're hoping to do it as soon as possible.
Next, we have Davis Legree with iPolitics. Please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Singh. Thanks for taking our questions. I appreciate that you want to talk about housing, so I'm sorry to go off topic again. But recent polls by Abacus and Angus Reid have the NDP seemingly stagnated in third place. However, your personal numbers remain better than both the Prime Minister and Mr. Poilievre, and frankly, they have been for some time. So I'm just wondering why you think people like you, but are less willing to vote for your party.
Well, first off, I don't take anything for granted. I'm honored that people see me someone they can trust and someone that's been fighting for them, but I don't take anything for granted. I know we've got to work very hard to ensure that people can also trust us with their vote. And more importantly, I want people to know that I see them, that I know people are right now hurting when it comes to the cost of groceries, the cost of living, and the cost of housing. And that's why we're talking about real solutions. While the Prime Minister is focused on saying it's not his problem, it's not his jurisdiction, and while Pierre Poilievre is focused on who to blame, blaming municipalities, I'm focused on coming up with real solutions, like the solutions that we're proposing today, to put in place a framework to build housing for students. We know that we've got a housing crisis in general, but one of those major concerns is the fact that students don't have housing. And so they're left to try to find housing like everyone else. There should be dedicated student housing. And why we need to do this is we can address this housing crisis when we tackle all the problems, making sure people can find homes that they can afford, making students have housing that's adequate for their needs, so they're not stuck in multi-hour commutes just to get to school. And so we're going to continue to do that work. We're going to let people know that we're here fighting for you, fighting to bring down the cost of groceries, fighting to make sure people can have homes they can afford. And I want folks to know that we're not going to take anything for granted. We're going to keep on fighting to gain their support and their trust.
That's helpful, thank you. But that trust that you've generated and those solutions that you've proposed have clearly resulted in people being fond of you. But why hasn't that translated in votes recently? And how will you try and fix that going forward?
Well, I think we've shown some results of the work that we've done, and those results are giving people confidence that we care about them. The fact that we've been able to get kids under 12 dental care, that is a real tangible change in people's lives. We spoke with just a couple of days ago in Edmonton. I spoke with Brianna. She's got 5 kids, and she said very upfront, with the cost of living as it is, she's got to focus on putting food on the table and keeping a roof over the head of her kids, and everything else besides that often has to get sacrificed. And she said she's got 5 kids under the age of 12, and she's not been able to get them to the dentist because it costs too much and she doesn't have coverage. With the benefit that we were able to get for her and her family, now all 5 of her kids have been able to see the dentist for the first time. That has been life-changing for them. The younger kids are getting preventative care to address early problems that were identified. And her eldest, who's under 12, turns out to have a rare disease. And now it's been identified. He's gonna be able to get the care that he needs to have good outcomes when he gets older. None of that would have been possible but for this program. So we're hoping with the results that we're showing people, we're delivering concrete things. Dental care for kids under 12. We got paid sick days at the federal level. We made legislation to lock in that childcare so that people can access it, and so that it's going to be focused on not-for-profit and public childcare. So we're giving concrete results, and we're hoping that we can use that as evidence that we are delivering for people because we care and we're fighting for you. And in the next election, we hope people can see us as a real alternative. You don't have to vote conservative and liberal. New Democrats are here for you. We're going to fight to make sure life is more affordable.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
We will now go to a question from Mackenzie Gray with Global News. Please go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Singh. Back in July, you said that the federal government should take aggressive steps to help Canadians who have mortgages out. Quote from you, forcing banks to give lower interest rates to families that are struggling. Another idea, subsidies for people who can't pay their mortgages right now. Many housing advocates panned that idea. Mike Moffitt from Western University said that this is by far the worst housing policy idea of 2023. Do you still support the idea of giving specific support to Canadians who have mortgages right now?
Well, let me be very clear. I know that right now a lot of people are struggling, and people are struggling with their rent. People are struggling with their mortgage. Other countries have taken more aggressive action to provide people relief. Those are actions that may work in those countries, don't necessarily work in Canada. Canada market is very different from other countries. So the solutions that they're proposing in other countries don't necessarily fit in Canada. And so I'm not suggesting that we do the same thing as other countries at all, but I am suggesting we take this seriously. And so far, we're not seeing that seriousness. From the federal government, from Justin Trudeau, he's more focused on trying to say that it's not his problem. And we've got a conservative leader who's just trying to blame municipalities. Neither of those approaches is going to help people out. So we remain resolute that we do need to provide solutions so that people can stay in their homes. And some of those solutions involve making sure banks can provide longer amortization so that people are not faced with the reality of not being able to pay their mortgage and then left without a home. We do have to find solutions, but my issue is that the federal government is not taking it seriously, and it has to be taken seriously.
I would say that, Mr. Singh, your comments back in July made it seem, at least, that you were supportive of the idea of specific government measures to help Canadians who have mortgages out, who are having difficulty making payments. So can you just clarify whether or not you would support similar measures like you referenced previously in Spain being brought and done in Canada to help Canadians who have mortgages right now?
We do need to take measures to ensure that people can stay in their homes, but the measures that other countries are doing don't fit the Canadian housing market. So I never intended, nor do I intend now, to suggest that we should do the exact same thing as other countries when it comes to housing. We are in the worst housing crisis compared to OECD countries. Our situation is far worse than many other countries, so we need different solutions. So to be clear, I'm not suggesting we do the same thing that other countries are doing when it comes to supports for people that are struggling with their mortgage, but we do need supports. We do absolutely need to find ways to ensure that people stay in their homes. And some of those measures that have been proposed are things that are being done on a bank's voluntary basis, things like the amortization period being stretched out. There are ways to ensure that we're putting in place better measures to keep people in their homes. We need to have tools and we need to have measures that work for our particular Canadian housing context. And the solutions that work in other countries don't necessarily work in ours. I never suggest that we should do the same thing as other countries, but I do suggest we should take the same urgency that we're seeing other countries take when it comes to ensuring that we tackle the housing crisis and the fact that people are at risk of losing their homes and that people are not able to find homes they can rent. We do need urgency in ensuring people are supported.
Nous allons à Émilie Bergeron de la presse canadienne. C'est à vous.
Bonjour, monsieur. Concernant, pour revenir à l'ingérence étrangère et les documents que vous allez consulter, vous aviez fait des demandes au premier ministre Justin Trudeau, par exemple, d'avoir des assurances que vous allez pouvoir aller le plus loin possible dans vos commentaires publics après avoir consulté les documents. Quelle garantie exactement avez-vous obtenue?
Oui, j'ai reçu des garanties, j'ai eu des briefages, des experts qui me donnaient le garantie que je peux donner mon opinion et les limites sont vraiment les limites pour garder la sécurité des personnels et j'accepte ces limites, mais ça ne limite pas mes opinions sur les documents, sur ce que j'ai reçu et je vais suivre tous les règlements, mais j'ai toutes les garanties pour donner mon opinion et je vais donner ça.
Vous aviez aussi demandé que 2 membres de votre équipe obtiennent aussi la cote de sécurité. Qui va vous accompagner donc pour consulter les documents?
On va vous donner les détails et on n'a pas décidé à ce moment qui va m'accompagner. Mais quand on est dans une position de décider, on va partager ces détails aussi.
Nous allons maintenant à Marie Chabot-Johnson avec Radio-Canada. C'est à vous.
Bonjour, Monsieur Singh. Merci
Bonjour,
de prendre ma question. Aujourd'hui, la Cour suprême a autorisé le recours de compagnies aériennes qui contestent la mise en place de la Charte des voyageurs. On voulait d'abord avoir votre réaction là-dessus, puis surtout, quelles conséquences ça pourrait avoir si on renversait la protection des passagers aériens?
Ça, c'est un grand problème parce que depuis longtemps, depuis des années, on a vu une situation dans les voyages aériens où les travailleurs, les voyageurs n'ont pas reçu les protections nécessaires. Donc, on doit assurer que ces protections fonctionnent et qu'on a un projet de loi qui peut protéger les voyageurs. C'est nécessaire, c'est important et on va suivre la décision. Et puis, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour mettre en œuvre quelque chose qui vraiment fonctionne pour protéger les voyageurs? Parce que c'est inacceptable qu'on a des entreprises qui font des profits massifs, qui ne protègent pas leurs voyageurs.
Une des critiques qu'on entend beaucoup, c'est en fait une comparaison d'un projet similaire qu'il y a eu en Europe et dont une des conséquences a été de créer une espèce de Far West où finalement le coût a été refilé aux consommateurs. Comment est-ce qu'on peut s'assurer de créer un système où au final, ça ne va pas être tout le monde qui va finir par payer pour les erreurs des compagnies aériennes?
Ça, c'est exactement le défi devant nous. On ne doit pas jamais faire en sorte que c'est les voyageurs qui doivent payer pour les erreurs des entreprises aériennes. C'est inacceptable. Donc, on ne peut pas permettre une telle situation de se passer. Donc, c'est exactement notre travail et la porte-parole pour notre équipe, Taylor Backrack, va continuer de faire son travail. On va continuer d'analyser les autres pays et ce qu'ils ont fait pour assurer que dans notre pays, on a une protection qui fonctionne, une protection qui protège les voyageurs et c'est les entreprises qui paient le prix.
We have one last question from Mary P. Brooke with Island Social Trend. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Singh. So on the student housing, are you finding post-secondary institutes willing to develop a deliberate correlation between the number of students they accept and the availability of housing either on campus or in their community?
Well, this is something that we're calling for the federal government to do when it comes to study permits, that those study permits should be allocated to institutions that can show they've got a plan for adequate student housing. And the second element is that we need a federal framework around funding where there's 1/3 investment from the federal government, 1/3 from the provincial government, and 1/3 from the institution to build student housing. We've got a housing crisis in general, but we have a particular housing crisis when it impacts students where they've got nowhere to live, nowhere that's affordable. We need specific dedicated student housing, dormitory style housing that can be built rapidly, that can house lots of students in a sufficient way to make sure that they get a place to live while they're going to school. And so those are the two things that I'm really focused on.
And can you speak to the imbalance between availability of housing for international students versus domestic? Because as the federal, and this is a federally related thing, as more immigration is happening, that population is just pouring into the post-secondaries in a way that may not have been accommodated for. So, and then also, have you done any outreach to the commercial real estate sector regarding that conversion of office space? Like, is there a deliberate effort to make that happen?
Yeah, I'll take the two questions separately. So first, when it comes to international students, they are absolutely faced with an even greater challenge when it comes to housing, significant costs for tuition. And so we want to make sure that study permits are being issued to institutions that actually have a plan in place for adequate student housing. That has not been the case so far, and that's something that we want to push for. When it comes to the businesses are actually very open to the idea. There's many office buildings that are vacant. There are many office buildings that are not being utilized that can be converted into residences, particularly student residences. And so there are businesses that are open to this, but we need to see partnerships where we're linking the institutions and not-for-profit organizations with those businesses to ensure that what we're building is actually affordable for students. That is a major concern of mine. We've got to build, and we've got to build rapidly, and we also have to make sure that we're building rapidly houses that are affordable for people, and in this particular case, affordable for students.
Thank you very much. So this concludes our press conference. I will throw it back to you, Jagmeet, for closing remarks.
Thanks so much. Again, I want to thank the students behind me. These are U of T students that are all facing serious challenges when it comes to housing. They deserve better, and I'm going to fight to make sure they get better. Thanks so much. Thank you.